Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Road Talk with Cade. Today is December 3rd, 2024. In this episode, I'll be recapping my trip to the beautiful state of Virginia, followed by two other topics that need to be covered. This adventure starts out in the morning of November 29th, 2024, where we hopped in my newly acquired 2025 Volkswagen Jetta to go on a vacation that I could no longer afford. The cost of the new car has put a strain on my travel funds, but with the hotels already being a sunk cost, I'll find a way to make up the funds down the road. With an empty wallet, I pointed the car north. I drove up to Blacksburg, Virginia to catch my 5th college football game of the season. This is also the first time I believe that I am covering a destination already visited in the podcast. If interested in comparing my two experiences in Blacksburg, I encourage you to revisit episode 3 of my original adventure that started this journey we are still on today. Back to the route at hand. As I crossed from the North Carolina state line into Virginia, I noticed a reoccurring pattern of large abandoned homes along my route. I have no idea why these homes were left to be recovered by the earth, but from my vantage point along the highway, I like to imagine them in their heyday, as the beautiful manors of the wealthy folk in the valley. I pray that one day they are restored to their original beauty. The game that was at the end of my journey is none other than the Commonwealth Cup, a rivalry between two in-state schools, Virginia and Virginia Tech. It is Turkey weekend after all, so what better way to spend it than watching the Hokies play? My excitement grew throughout the day as I was about to witness Enter Sandman, which is one of the best traditions in college football, as well as watch two teams that hate each other's guts battle it out for the 105th time. And more importantly, whoever wins the game gets the right to a bowl game. Sadly, the game did not kick off until 8 p.m., so I had to fill my day with a few other stops first. I passed Blacksburg around noon and went 45 minutes further northeast to the city of Roanoke, Virginia. Here's where I would find my hotel, as well as spend my afternoon. While looking for my first meal of the day and a sports bar to watch football at, I came across a few different options on my phone. The first I tried, the Fill-In Station Sports Bar and Grill. Upon entry to the bar, I could tell something was off right away, starting with the smell, and then the bartender greeting me with a lit cigarette in one hand and a menu in the other. I was unaware that smoking bars were still a thing, let alone ones that serve food is a whole other can of worms. For a sports bar, this place had the smallest TVs you'd ever seen, with one actual sized TV on the wall, with which the local patrons and the bartender watched Harry Potter while they chain-smoked cigarettes for the entire 30 minutes I was there. My food was served on a paper plate that was brought out of the kitchen directly from behind the bar, which didn't even have a curtain covering the door to block out the smoke. Quite a welcoming experience if I do say so myself. After an unfulfilling breakfast, coated in the stench of cigarettes, I decided it best for me to try another sports bar that more suited what I was looking for. Don't get me wrong, I do not despise my time at the Fill-In Station, nor do I think it is a bad establishment. I only would prefer to find myself there after midnight compared to the hours of noon. So on to the next bar I went, 2 miles down the road to the Extreme Sports Bar starting with no E. And when I got there, it was completely fenced off on all sides, which left me standing in a parking lot asking myself, what in the hell is going on in this town? So back in the car I hopped, with fingers crossed, to the last sports bar on the north side of Roanoke. I pulled into the hangout on the outskirts of town, with a full parking lot this place had promised. A no smoking sign hung on the door, so I opened it, to find an almost empty establishment with just a few locals sitting around a U-shaped bar on the back side of the building. I walked in, took a seat, and thought to myself, the third time's always the charm. Non-smoking, spacious, and the exact game I wanted to watch on the main TV behind the bar. I spent the next 3 hours with Russ, Sydney the bartender, and the other locals learning about the town of Roanoke. To me, upon entry, the city felt much more northern Rust Belt than its geographical location on the map. From the bumps in the road to the rundown buildings along the streets I traveled, you could have convinced me I was in Pittsburgh. You could feel the grit of the older folk in the bar who felt abandoned by many of their former employers who left town. I could also feel the pride at which they called Roanoke home. In that bar, I was reminded of the reasons I enjoy my random adventures so much, because of conversations like those. After an afternoon well spent, I checked into my hotel, then drove back south to the city of Blacksburg. This time, instead of taking the interstate, I took the back roads through the Catawba Valley into the sunset. The scenic route beats the highway every time. In the valley, I was met with countless farms sitting in the meadows, painted perfectly in front of the mountains that are covered with trees, who just weeks ago lost their leaves. The video I post just simply won't do it justice. A spectacle that caught me in a moment in time. White farmhouses, accented with a chimney on each side, centered with a welcoming porch. Tied together with quaint barns providing shelter for the animals in the fields. Everything fit to make it perfectly picturesque. I entered the city of Blacksburg as darkness took control of the night. Struggled to find a parking spot before a church parking lot waved me in. As I walked towards the stadium, I stopped at the J.H. Bard Spirits Co. tasting room that lay just on the edge of campus. Now, I normally don't drink liquor, but with the kickoff temp at 28 degrees, I thought a little whiskey in my system could keep my innards warm on a night like this. After a delicious old-fashioned and a maple bourbon on the rocks, I could feel my face was flush. An hour before kickoff, it was time for me to make my way over to Lane Stadium. As I have stated many times, Virginia Tech is my favorite campus that I've been to architecturally. Sadly, with the sun set, I didn't get to enjoy the campus this time. But Saturday, I was there for a different reason. Virginia Tech is arguably one of the best traditions in college football. Before every game, they run out of the tunnel to Metallica's Enter Sandman, as 66,000 Hokies fans jump so hard you can feel the ground shake below your feet. Even with the cold temperatures, from the moment I was in the stadium to the moment I left, I had a smile across my face. From the marching band being called the Heidi Tighties, to the fans being proud of that, to the enormous turkey leg I got to devour while watching young men crack pads until the dust settled. Lane Stadium is one of the best venues in sports. I hope that one day they return to the college football dominance they had when I was a kid, and one of the reasons that made me fall in love with the sport in the first place. On my drive back to Roanoke after the game, I felt an immense sense of gratitude for my life. As an extremely pessimistic man, I feel fortunate that so far through 23 years, I have been provided with such a unique life to call my own. Since my experience with Hurricane Helene, I have grown much closer in my faith with God. And many times throughout my life, I have doubted and questioned my own faith. Every day is a step into a world that I cannot predict in front of me. Through all the trials and tribulations of my 23 years, it took something bigger than me for me to understand that He's taking care of me. I went to bed that night saying thank you for guiding my feet through the fog of life, as only He can see the future in the journey that I'm just beginning. That next morning, I woke up after a quick 5 hours of sleep to hit the road again. The route on the second day's trip would take me even further north into the heart of Virginia, to the small town of Shenandoah. As I ventured further into the Appalachian side of Virginia, I was greeted with many more of these beautiful farm homes that sit so perfectly in the valleys of Virginia. Unfortunately, I was unable to find any information on these houses while writing, but I'm very fond of them. They encapsulate the beauty of the Virginia mountains, as well as tell the story and culture of many generations that have long since passed us by. Upon my arrival into the small town of Shenandoah, I ate breakfast at Rudy's Diner, the only diner in town. It was fire department themed, and to my delight, served proper portions of breakfast food. Absolutely phenomenal biscuits and gravy at that place. Now you may ask, Cade, why drive 2 hours north to a town of 2,000 people? To my response, which is simply, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia. God, I can't sing at all, but that's not the point. A song I have sung no less than 1,000 times in my life. A song about Western Virginia, in which the Blue Ridge Mountains carry the water down the Shenandoah River. Yeah, I drove 2 hours out of my way because I like a song. A bit well worth every second it took of my time. Now every time I hear the song, I can say I've been there. After my breakfast, I climbed the Blue Ridge Mountains into the Shenandoah National Park, which I didn't know was even a thing until I was already there. To enter the park, I paid a steep $30 fee to get on Skyline Drive, so that I could enjoy a hike that overlooked the valley that I just spent my morning driving through. I chose the Hawksbill Trail as my hike for the day. I ascended to the top of Hawksbill Mountain by foot a mile later. From my vantage point, I could see everything I wanted to, but that wasn't what had my attention. On my entire venture up the mountain, I was more focused on the way the forest made me feel. Something about the barren trees, gloomy skies, sharp jutting rocks, and what looked to be mint green algae covering many of the rocks gave me an eerie, almost sort of creepy feeling as though I was being watched. The Appalachian mountain range is home to many cryptids. After my experience here, I could tell why. Everything about my time spent there just gave me the heebie-jeebies. Other notes while in the state park run as follows. After further research, that plant I call green algae is none other than green foliose boulder lichen, which is very common in the area. As well as the trail was heavily used and fully graveled over, which I am not a fan of, but from the looks of it, that's how all trails were along this stretch of the parkway. Lastly, the amount of deer along my 20-mile drive was astounding. They were all grazing along the sides of the roads, not even caring to acknowledge the cars driving by. After leaving the national park, I drove southeast towards my final destination of the trip, the capital city of Richmond, Virginia. Along my journey, I came upon James Madison's Montpelier, which sadly I did not make time for. During my time traveling across many back roads, I found myself enamored at the amount of money invested into the homes in the surrounding area. Sitting in the foothills of the Appalachia, many statesmen from Washington chose this area to build their getaways. One of my favorite parts about the drive through the state of Virginia was that at every county line, they have a sign to let you know which county you are entering and which county you are exiting. As someone who has the 72 counties of Wisconsin memorized by heart, I take great appreciation in the state of Virginia and in that fun detail into their statehood. I arrived in Richmond an hour before I was able to check into my hotel. What I planned on doing was studying some of the local Civil War history, as Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. What I instead did was walk around the Churchill neighborhood on the east side of town, taking my time to stare at people's homes from the sidewalk. The streets were lined with beautiful Greek Revival and Federal-style brick homes. This neighborhood also holds the grounds for where the largest Civil War hospital was located, as well as where one of our founding fathers, Patrick Henry, gave his "Give me liberty or give me death" speech in 1775. A really unique little neighborhood packed with all sorts of history. After my mile-plus walk around the neighborhood, I found it time to check into the Linden Row Inn, which would be my hotel for the night. A historic hotel in downtown Richmond, which self-describes itself as a place with old-world charm with modern luxuries. As I found my way to my garden suite, I thoroughly enjoyed the experience at the inn. Walking through the courtyard to my room made me oddly giddy. It transferred me back in time. After settling into my room, I walked through the Virginia Commonwealth University campus, which was right next door to me. That is where I found a bite to eat for the night. For dinner, I had a slice of pizza from the local pizza shop and a side of mac and cheese from the bar next door. I stayed for a drink or two, but as the night moved in, I could feel the exhaustion of my body. I retired back to my hotel early on Sunday night, waking up 11 hours later, which is very not like me, but was well-needed rest. The following morning, I stopped to see the Capitol building, which I almost forgot to do. At first glance, the Capitol building to me felt rather small, but after learning from a grounds crew person who was putting up a Christmas tree that you actually enter the building from the bottom of the hill, I learned that the building is partially underground, which explains its rather small appearance. The building that had my full attention, however, was the old City Hall building, a Gothic Revival-style structure built of gray granite. This building is, to me, how I believe every building should be built. Behind it sat the VCU Medical Main Hospital that is built with glass facades and no character. To this I ask, which way, modern man? A reversal back to architecture of true beauty, or lifeless glass squares of depression? Architecture is a form of art, and we as a society have lost that somewhere along the way. After staring at more buildings, I made my way down to the James River, to the American Civil War Museum, to finally take in some Civil War history. My experience of the museum was much of a letdown, to say the least. The surrounding construction led to my entire 90 minutes there, listening to a jackhammer as I tried to learn about my country's past. One small highlight for my reading was the importance the Shenandoah Valley played in the United States Civil War. In early 1964, leading up to the presidential election later that year, Abraham Lincoln saw almost no hope in winning re-election. That was until General Sherman took Atlanta in early September, followed by a decisive victory in Cedar Creek in the Shenandoah Valley in mid-October. The control of the Shenandoah Valley was crucial to the North because of its major supply route during the war. Those battles fought there not only decided who would be president, but also the future that our country would take to allow me to be here today. After my time in the museum, I drove 5.5 hours back to Asheville, satisfied with my weekend in Virginia. The state motto of Virginia is for lovers. With my second experience in the state of Virginia at its completion, I couldn't agree more. How could you not love all that the Commonwealth has to offer? As I stated earlier, there are things I wanted to add into the end of the podcast. That first being the lack of a follow-up when it came to what happened to me since the third day of the storm. As to keep this short, me and work came to an agreement on how to handle the situation, which sent me back home to Wisconsin for a month or more. I have a podcast recorded from my time back home. However, I didn't like the way it sounded, and I've chosen to keep it off the record for now. I do not want what has been such a painful situation for so many to sound like a chance for me to gloat about how nice of a time I had back home. The second order of business is my purchase of a new car, or as my dad called it, my first adult purchase. All I have to say about the car buying process is that it is the most stressful thing I've ever done, but I don't want to talk about the car I bought, but rather instead the car I had, the old Cruze. The car I took over from my dad and started driving at the age of 16, a car that has treated me well for 8 years and 60,000 miles. So many fond memories of that car. The countless hours I spent aimlessly driving the local roads around home simply because I had my license. Taking diesel for rides to now never being able to get the hair out of the carpet. The tiki torch stains that are still smudged into the ceiling of the car when I tried to throw the party this summer during COVID. To the time I had to replace the driver's side door because I sideswiped Trevor Rice's well pipe trying to park my car in his driveway. Moving across the country not once but twice. Delivering Amazon packages as a side gig during my senior year of college, still my favorite job I've had to date. Losing my antenna in the car wash and never finding it, and still, 4 years later, never replacing it. Countless trips with friends to dinner during high school and college. Mine and Peyton's trips back and forth to work during COVID. Remember when I gouged my tire out at 3 a.m. and my dad had to come rescue us because the car doesn't have a spare? Oh man, was that a disaster. When I hit a deer in the fog driving Trey to work in the morning, followed up by me and Dad tying a chain to the frame and the other end of the tree and slamming it into reverse until the frame was straight. To lastly, the grand adventure. The start of the endeavor that I now call my life today. That car has taken me everywhere up to this point. I will forever have a special place in my heart for the old Cruze and wish I had more stories to tell of it. I'm sure many more will come to mind now that I've written this. For now, thank you for listening. I love you. Bye.